Are you ready to be unmessable with? Well, you are in the right place. Welcome to Be Unmessable With, the podcast where you get the inspiration, strategy, and coaching to be unmessable with, no matter what life throws at you. And now, your host, Jocelyn Herman-Saccio.
Welcome to Be Unmessable With the podcast. I am your host, Jocelyn Herman-Saccio, and today I have a very honored guest. He is truly a fashion icon. He's a fashion designer who has dressed people from Ali McGraw to more uniformed workers than any designer in the world. He was the president of the Council of Fashion Designers for 16 years, and he continues to put his mark on brand identities from FedEx to JetBlue to Sandals Resorts, just to name a few. Stan Herman has incorporated his ready-to-wear design savvy to become America's foremost designer of robes and loungewear. So he has actually been one of the best-selling presenters and personalities on QVC for more than 24 years. And get this, he has sold more than $150 million worth of robes alone. He has recently published his memoir, Uncross Your Legs, A Life in Fashion, and what a life it has been so far. He is turning 96 this week. I could cry, 96. And I am so proud to say that he has known me since I was born because he's my Uncle Stan. That's right. And I am so happy that he said yes to being on the show. So welcome, Uncle Stan.
Well, who is that you've been talking about? I don't know that man. I don't know that man. Oh my dear Joss, it's that's quite an introduction, and it's been quite a life.
It has, and that's and what I said was literally tiny bits of your life. You know, you can't really capture somebody who's nearly 100 years old, their life in an introduction, but I'll record it for you so you can play it every morning when you wake up.
Okay.
So fill in some of the blanks for us in terms of, you know, your vast, not just career, but your life, sort of like the leverage points or the spots that show up for you when you look at how you ended up doing what you're doing now and being who you are.
Let me start in my book, Uncross Your Legs. The opening line is in the beginning. That starts my life. And, you know, to have the luxury of writing a memoir at this stage of my life, bringing back the past and bringing it to the future, if there was one, certainly the present, has been a wonder. So it's easy for me to tell you about the beginnings because I've been thinking about them. I've been writing about them. I'm a Depression baby. I was born in 1928. That's a long time ago. And I was born to parents who were had no real money. They had a great love for each other. I had the typical upbringing of a Jewish family that tried to be middle class, but really didn't have the money to be that way, and covered and coveted their children in the way that that I think was very helpful for the future of our life. In the beginning, my mother died when I was 12, which is very, very young. She was 36. My father, of course, went on to live a glorious 105 years. And they watched this young boy say to them, even at the early age of like 8 or 9, that he wanted to be a clothing designer. I think that's quite fascinating that I zeroed in on that very early on. That probably came from the fact that my father eventually owned silk shops all around New Jersey and Pennsylvania, shops that I watched over, shops that I worked in, shops that I sat and looked at pattern books of clothing that were dressing the world at that time. Women were sewing, they were buying fabrics, which is something that's an art form that's disappeared. I actually looked forward to coming down to my father's store on a Friday night and selling fabric, telling women what color to buy, what print looked better on against their skin.
Look, some things haven't changed.
Well, exactly true.
It's
But
amazing.
you'll probably find, and you know me for such a long time, I'm one of those people that really knew sort of from the beginning what I wanted to do. I didn't know that that's what I was doing, but I knew how many young Jewish boys at the age of 12 didn't announce to their father they want to be a designer. And usually a father like that would say, "Oh my, you don't want to be a lawyer, you don't want to be a I'm first,
Doctor.
yeah, right. I'm a first son. The first son is supposed to lead the pack. I know your father, who's my brother, is a second son. That's another story completely.
Yes, that'll be a whole other episode.
That's right. That's a second son syndrome. And but I had a sheltered early life. I had my brother Harvey. Then of course my father remarried. My mother died when she was only 36. That was a jolt.
Yeah.
That was a jolt in my life, but I handled it like I usually handle those things very well. I went back into my little cocoon. I had my own private little world, and I sort of understood my father's conundrum. Unfortunately, I wasn't crazy about my stepmother, not because she was a nasty woman, but she wasn't very bright, and I was beginning to, blossom as an not an intellect, but somebody interested in many things that weren't available to me in Passaic, New Jersey. And she was not a part of that. Whereas I think my mother would have been very much. She gave me piano lessons, dancing lessons. I don't know what she thought I was. Maybe she thought I was Liberace. I don't know. But
Did you know that I produced the biography on Liberace?
I did not. I,
You would say Liberace of all the
I
people. Isn't that funny?
No, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Actually, Evelyn loved Liberace. My stepmother loved Liberace. She thought he was the cat's meow. She had, and I wasn't a Liberace lover. So, but let's not go there.
Okay, we'll save the Liberace
Yeah.
with the Barry Manilow episode, who is
Right,
my
right.
yes, exactly. But
But
there you are in Jersey, and you're having all these ignited thoughts and feelings and explorations. Then what happened?
well, what happened was I decided to go to school outside of New York. I knew that New York was going to be the anchor of my life eventually. But I made a decision to get away from the family unit. I didn't want to be near Evelyn. I didn't want to be near my father at that point. And I have to admit that in retrospect, I can't remember how my feelings about Harvey. I just don't know. But I decided to get out and move to the Midwest. I moved went to a school that the criteria for me was there had to be a symphony orchestra in Cincinnati. There had to be some culture. It had to be big enough so that I felt I was in a city and not in Passaic, New Jersey. And so I went to University of Cincinnati, which was not an A+ school, but it was wonderful for me. I found friends, and as is my want, and as is what usually happened in my life, I became president of everything I did.
Yes.
I became president of this fraternity. I became president of my class. And I set down short routes in Cincinnati. I ripped them up quickly when I left. I didn't want to be there forever. But so I moved to the Midwest, studied design and English, got a degree, and then came back to New York, wondering where I was going to end up. And we haven't got into my sexuality yet, but that was a very important factor for me.
Mm.
The And what happened was I got drafted in the Army.
I was going to ask, when did the Army come into play? But there it is,
Exactly,
right there.
that's exactly when it came in. I sort of heaved a sigh of relief. I had gotten a job and I was working in Philadelphia and I was being chased by this guy and I wasn't sure that's where my life was going to be. And somehow it was the Korean War, so it was a difficult time, but 50,000 people were killed in the Korean War. I mean, people that were in service. And I was drafted. Sidney, my father, was very happy, I think. His son was giving back to America. Actually, they thought that I wasn't going to be drafted because my mother died of a heart condition. And when she died, I developed that condition, which was psychosomatic. And they thought that I would never be drafted. But my heart was good. Obviously, it's been good to my age right now. And I went into the Army. And like all things, believe it or not, Jossie, I liked it. I was able to con my way out of Korea, and I was sent to Germany, I was sent to Europe, and that changed my life.
Mm.
Looking at the continent of Europe, finding the Alps, finding the mountains, finding the culture, finding the music,
Oh,
finding the camaraderie of all these men who probably I wanted to do all my life but never knew, and finally finding a way to come out. All happened
amazing.
2 year stint in Europe, and a very important part of my book. There are large chapters about it in the book. Uh, I was shocked because only 5 years after the World War II, the war that ended all wars, after 5 years after that, I was sent to Germany, where they had Anschluss all the Jews. They had killed 7 million Jews. I thought I would hate it, Joss. I thought I would be mad all the time. And fuck it, I fell in love with the German language. My father spoke it. I can get along with it now. I fell in love with the culture. And I was
Yeah.
furious with myself. Furious. How could it happen? Even the people, who I'm sure half of them were Nazis. But somehow, and of course, coming out as a gay person at the time didn't hurt. So
And what year was that? That was like in the late
1951, 52.
51, 52. Definitely not like a bunch of people coming out at that time.
No, no, no. And when I say come out, I accepted I didn't have a t-shirt saying I'm gay, but I definitely, accepted it. And it became as easy as I thought heterosexual sex would be, which I found very difficult in the beginning. I mean, I never performed properly. And this was like coming home to mama. I mean, it was what I was supposed to have been a long time before that, but couldn't accept.
Yeah, that must have been a turning point for you in terms of being at home in yourself, you know?
Big time, big time, big time,
Yeah.
big,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
so then after the war or after your service, how did you end up designing? How did that go
Well,
from
I had studied design in Cincinnati, so I had a 4 year degree, and I had gone to school briefly in New York, at Trapphagen and a place called Chick School. And I was cute. I was a number and smart. And I started to interview in New York, and I plugged myself into the right side of the tracks, not the wrong side of the tracks, which has been my want the rest of my life.
mm,
I've never motivated to people that were bad. Never, never, never. And I can look back and say that's true. And if I did, I'd stepped away very, very quickly. I may have had partners that could have been better, could have helped me more. I could have maybe flourished more under different people, but I never really had bad people around me. And I know so many of my friends who do somehow are motivated toward trouble. I'm not motivated toward trouble. I'm motivated toward, well, I'm not sure where I am, but I'm not motivated toward trouble. I don't get a kick out of that.
yeah.
Uh, and so I got a job sketching for a very famous woman designer named Vera Benenson, and I began the process of becoming a third designer, second designer, assistant, uh, coffee table boy, coffee anybody in the afternoon, and I apprenticed for about 9 years before I got my first job as a full-fledged designer.
Mm,
And from there, that was the basis. There was a moment in time where we haven't gotten to Gene yet, but that was very, very important because it all happened simultaneously. I came back to New York. I applied for jobs in the industry, began the search for them. And at the same time, 8 months after I got out of the Army, I hit the wall of contentment. I found the man of my life. It was a Pollyanna, gorgeous, love of your life, first time meeting, touching, and knowing we were right for each other, and we had 40 years together. So it was everything was happening at once, and it was a great relationship. It had its problems, like all relationships do. There were moments that were very tricky, but it's the kind of relationship that you write about, you dream about, you want in your life, and I had it. And it was difficult because he was a writer, a novelist, and a teacher, and I was a clothing designer. So there you go. But there we were, both of us in our early to mid 20s, ready to fight the fight, ready to become partners. And we were like a married couple long before gays were even thinking about marrying, long before any of that happened. We became the poster children for the underground as two guys who really made it. Jean's family were completely accepting. My family was not. My father was not. Even your father was not accepting of my of what had become with me. But our relationship was so strong and balanced so well that I didn't need anybody else's approval. And again, Josh, looking back, you'll see as you get older, you look back, you see yourself. You don't know yourself while you're in it, but you see yourself. And without being Pollyanna, and if you're real about who you are, you think about why you did these things and why you didn't. But I've been pretty consistent in my life.
I would say that's one of the main things that I love about you, but it's also very interesting to me because if you think about Gene, right, who was my uncle, Gene,
Right.
who passed away about what, 30 years ago
33
or
years ago, 33 years ago.
33 years ago. Now, since then, I have never really seen you with another person as a relationship. I mean, and you've lived in the same house for
Right.
more than 60 years. And you've
55,
lived in this
65.
65 years in the house, and you've lived in the same apartment
Right.
for how many years?
50.
50 years. And you had the same dog. And when the dog passed, no more dogs.
No more
When
dogs.
your partner passed, no more partners. Not like
Right.
that.
Right.
So to me, there's something about you that is, I don't know, what's the word would you say that kind of is the through line?
I don't know. I don't know. I have to think about that. But
Yeah,
again, it's all balanced. It's like a balancing act. The seesaw goes right, left, up, down. And at the moment Gene died, which was 33 years ago, just at that moment, I was selected to become president of the Council of Fashion Designers of America. And I think if that hadn't happened, the seesaw would have really dipped the other way. We were talking, he was asking, why don't I retire? Remember, I was already in my 60s. I should retire. It's time. He was a writer, a novelist, had 6 books published, but he was having a hard time. And I was seriously beginning to think about it, but knowing I didn't really want to, I wasn't ready to. We haven't really talked about my career on 7th Avenue, but that's another story. And when he died, and he died in one day. It was just
I remember I was in England and I got the phone call. I couldn't believe it. It was just so sudden.
what it was. But it was just like magic. There was the CFDA and the Council of Fashion Designers. I was plucked out of almost anonymity. My career had sort of leveled off to practically nothing. I was still designing, but not on the fast lane at all. And suddenly he was gone and the CFDA was there. I took that job on thinking it was going to be temporary, maybe 2 years at the most. And it ended up 16 years and they became my lover. So I didn't go out at night with a guy or with a woman. I went out and out with the CFDA. I became best friends with all the famous designers. I became their daddy. I became the guy that they trusted. I took 7th Avenue, the fashion world, and changed it a lot. I'm responsible for all the 10 shows in Bryant Park. By the way, I just had a bench in my honor. You can come and sit on my bench.
I will come sit on your bench when I'm
Right.
back.
And so, again, the yin and yang of my life worked out. Gene went, the CFDA came, and all the friends sort of wrapped their arms around me. And then, of course, the other interesting thing happened not too long after that is your brother moved out.
My brother, my
Oh, I'm
father.
sorry.
I
No,
was like, my
sorry,
brother,
your father.
he
I
passed
know
away
your
30 years ago
I
too.
know. I know. That's subliminally. It must have been in my
Yeah,
head.
it was right around the same time.
Came out here to be sort of wrap himself around me, which was a shock to me, Joss. I had no idea that they were going to do that. They're living up in Connecticut was so foreign to me, and we weren't that close. And all of a sudden, he moved into my life, and then all the other people who became my friends were there. I say in the book, and I say it all the time. Sidney, my father, who really never accepted my homosexuality, always said, what's going to happen when you get older? What's going to happen? You're going to have no friends, no children. You're not going to have a family. I have friends. I have a family. I have. It's a different kind of a family, but it is a family.
It's a created
Right.
family.
Absolutely.
And even us who are your family, we're your family. I mean, when you're in the
Right.
hospital, we're there, and we're,
Absolutely.
like it's
Absolutely.
it's very organic, I think. And when Dad moved out there, your relationship shifted. So talk a little bit about that, because it's not like it was bad in the past, but it did take a different form.
Well, it wasn't a great relationship. There was a time during when with Gene and your father actually was a little frightened of my lover. He said to me just the other day, you always like intellectual people around you. I don't like that. I don't like that. He has to sort of dominate. It's his Leo personality. Although I do think he has a lot of Virgo in him. And
Like you and me, the
yeah,
Virgos.
we're Virgos. We're definitely Virgos. There's no doubt about it. Our cadence is Virgo. The way we respond is very Virgo. We can be very solitude, but once the spotlight's there, we're out. We're out there. Where was I about your father?
You were
Oh,
saying that it wasn't great,
but then
that
when he moved out here, and of course when your mother got sick, somehow everything started to mellow. It was interesting watching him flourish with his art, which is very frustrating for me and for him because he wants so much more out of it. I don't quite know how that's going to happen, but you never know. You never know. And we became, I would say, much closer than we've ever been. And now we're as close as you can be as brother. I mean, he calls me 3 times a day. I call him 3 times a day, which makes 6.
and then my mother likes to sing with you.
Oh, no, I sing to her. She doesn't even know. I call her Frau Wesendonck. Now, she doesn't know that Wesendonck is a series of songs written by Richard Wagner called the Wesendonck Lieder. And he wrote them for his anti-Semitic wife. but I sing them to your mother. And as you know, people who have dementia love to sing.
Yes, she
She
loves the
knows
music.
every word. She knows every word. I can say, "You'll never get away from me," and she said, "I'll climb the highest tree." It's
It's adorable. You guys are like
no,
literally an
no,
act.
absolutely, absolutely. But as long as I'm the first on the billing, I count. She said, "You can be the first. It's okay. I can be the first." And then, of course, your father likes to sing along with us, and he thinks he's an alto baritone.
Well, when he's
I studied
painting,
voice like you did. You had a great voice. I studied voice for 15 years. I mean, I'm a serious singer. My accompanist, believe it or not, was Pavarotti's accompanist. You can't get more serious than that. But I was a closet singer, a real closet singer. I sang beautifully in the shower. I actually sang at two performances at the Amato Opera Company. I sang in La Boheme and I sang in the Fledermaus. And I had a beautiful voice, but I didn't know it was mine. It was just, I was frightened of it. And to this day, I spent a lot of my day just listening to voices. I've just fallen in love with an opera singer named Asmik Grigorian. She's Lithuanian Armenian, and she's gorgeous, and her voice is just the most gentle instrument in the world. I play at least an hour of her every day.
well, let's talk about your love of classical music a little bit, because it's really a broad array of music that you listen to, but it's a dedication. I mean, you will sit in your car and listen to an opera for hours. Why do you do it in your car? Because you have the Sirius radio?
Sirius radio. I didn't have it here. Although I just got Sonos, so I'll be able to do it here.
Okay.
But it's a nice thing to be at the beach and listen to it. I give credit to Gene for my opera for my classical music thing. I when I was very young, there must have been something about me that wanted to know about classical music. And I remember going into a music store where they used to sell big records, and I would pick out classical music that I didn't know from composers, not the Beethovens and not the Brahms and not the Bach, but strange people for me, and they're like Smetana and Strauss and Janacek. I would find these pieces, and I remember some of them had very strange names. One was called Death and Transfiguration, which is a Strauss. Poem. And when Evelyn married my father, she got freaked by my record collection. I remember her saying to Sydney, how could he buy something called Death and Transfiguration?
Mm.
The worst thing in the world. She had no idea what it was. And she got rid of them. She got rid of them, which was very tricky for me. I don't know how she did it. I don't know how I let her do it. But so I always motivated to it. And my father loved opera.
Yes,
My
he
father
did.
would listen to the opera every Saturday, and I would go with him upstairs in his office, and we would listen together. And I'd see this stoic man sit there and cry, tears coming out, dropping from his eyes when he was listening to the death of some beautiful soprano. And I mean, it was bawling. He hated German opera. I love German opera. He hated anything about Germany because, and I certainly understand that. I
Yeah,
respect
of course.
but and so also I was lucky. Gene took me to an opera, huh, an opera I used to make fun of called Die Fliegende Holländer, the Flying Dutchman. And there's a soprano who starts her big aria in the second act, and she opened her mouth and my life changed.
Mm.
I thought, oh my God, who is that? What is that sound? Her name was Leonie Rieseneck. She's now long dead. She died in 1993, but she became my friend. I got to know her, and Gene and I followed her around Europe, wherever she sang. She was very sweet to me after Gene died. And and then of course I don't even know if your father remembers that, but a great dear friend of mine who was the head of Opera News died of AIDS, and he left a pretty large estate not to me, but I was to represent the estate and find a way to give it to young singers, very young opera singers. So I became the president of this organization of young singers. People like Renee Fleming came out of that organization, and I couldn't handle it. So I pushed it over to the Richard Tucker Foundation, and it's still in existence today. So any young singers who come through the Richard Tucker Foundation and win, it all has to do with the money that was given to me by a
Amazing.
friend of mine. So I'm into music, and I feel sorry for people who haven't discovered the sound of music that is so classic, that you play it over and over and over again, and every day it has a different feeling. I have a feeling, by the way, your son Sage is going to be the one in the family who finds it. He just
I
fell
agree.
he just fell on Orfeo and Eurydice. He fell in love with the goodness of it. He understood where the wealth of that music was coming from, and that's not given to many people. I hope he
And he
continues.
has the voice of an angel. We sit at the door when he sings in the shower just to listen.
You know, he sang for me. I told you that when I was sick. I asked him. He said, "I don't know." He sang for me, and I was shocked. He is a countertenor, which means he's singing in the soprano fach. He actually has fallen in love with the singer in Orfeo and Eurydice, who's a Polish countertenor who's incredible, and he just met him, and he's very excited about him. So that's so sweet.
Yeah.
He hasn't called me. I'm a little pissed at him. He hasn't called me to tell me, what's going on. But that's a good opera for him to move into the opera world. Not Fidelio, which he saw in Vienna.
In Vienna, yes.
This one.
But when he got that job to design the thing for the Met, you were his first call. He told you before me.
No, absolutely. I was very excited. And I have a feeling, Jossie, that this is going to be a change in his career. I don't think he's going to end up just being a country. He may end up, being a set designer for opera or more than that. Who knows? It's a wonderful world.
Yes.
And he also can take courses at the new school about opera, things about. I haven't talked to him about that, but he needs his zets that way. He needs to be challenged. That son of yours has to be challenged. If
Yes,
he's not
I
challenged,
agree.
he sleeps too much.
Yes, yes, he's got that teenage sleeping thing going
I
on.
know he's pre-teenage too.
Yes, exactly. But given this show is called Be Unmessable With, I mean, your whole life is a demonstration of being unmessable with, but is there a time in your life, and it can be more than one time, where you were dealing with something that was so difficult, Stan, that most people would not have emerged from it, what I call unmessable with, really transcended the situation, something that could have taken you down, could have taken you out for the count, but it didn't. and somehow you were able to transcend it. Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious thing that comes to mind was my loss of Jean.
Yeah.
That was a blow that was really, I had given up. You know it. You're in a relationship. When you give up, when you're in a relationship, you give up at least half of your life. Half of what your reactions might be go out the window, and they're pictured in a frame of two, not of one. So when Jean passed away so quickly, uh, I could have probably folded my Cars Inc. I was lucky again. The CFDA came along just at the right time.
Yeah.
And I was able to pick up the pieces. In fact, there was a moment when I said, "Oh my God, I almost feel a sense of relief," which is hard to say about that kind of love affair. But you lose a lot of who you are. You have to understand that when you're in a deep, intense, loving relationship, when that's over with, so much of you has gone down the drain. And I had to find that water flow again. I had to become a part of real life again. That was probably the time that would be my unmessable moment. I mean, your brother keep saying your brother. I'm sorry, I keep saying your
It's
brother.
okay. It's your brother. That's all
My
right.
brother.
I had a brother too,
Yeah, I
but
know you did. I remember him vividly. He was a brilliant young man. Brilliant.
he reminds me of Sage, actually,
Does he
in
really?
a lot of ways. Yeah.
Huh. Well, was he a Capricorn?
Well, it was November 22nd was his
No,
birthday.
he's a Scorpio. He was a Scorpio.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, but as my career, the work thing, uh, I kept an even keel with it. I lost a lot of things. I failed in at many moments, but I talk about it in the book and I say it a lot. My life was like a big apple pie
Mm.
with very crisp edges. I had my moment in the center, in the hot center, when I had Mr. Mort, when I was the hottest thing going in America as a young designer, dressing all these beautiful young ladies. I was as hot as you could get on Seventh Avenue, and then I wasn't, and I was able not to fall through the cracks there. Uh, every time there seemed to be a step given to me to hold on to. Uh, the other thing about me that I've found out in my life as I've gotten older, and the fact that I have so many friends is, um, people like me, and I like them. Uh, I can't tell you, Josh, what happens when I go down to QVC with all the people down there.
Well, you're a
How
legend there. I mean, it's
well
like,
I know, but it's just the warmth of their embrace of me. It's a good feeling, and it's a very nice feeling to be 90, almost 96 years old and find the kind of life that I have. Right now I'm looking at you and I'm looking at a little barn finch eating out of my bird feeder and a fucking squirrel trying to chase her out of it, and looking out at one of the prettiest lakes imaginable. Can it get better than that? Can't get better than that.
well, you didn't fall into that life. You created that life, and that was a
Well
very
said. Well said. Well
intentional
said. Well said.
intentional creation on your part.
Well
And,
said.
there's so much about you that's worth talking about. But even just still playing tennis at 96 years old, and
Absolutely.
that's
Absolutely.
insane. Talk about being unmessable with. What do people even say? You go out on the court and they're just
Well,
like,
first of all, they don't know how old I am. I don't look 96. I look maybe 94. I have have a great story the other day because I'm playing the age game now. Oh, I'm the oldest man alive. Oh, no, no. I got in the cab in New York.
milk it, baby.
I did. I am. I got in this cab in New York, and this cab driver was complaining about, "Oh, I'm getting so old. I'm a driver." I said, "You can't be as old as I am." And I said, "You'll never guess how old I am." And he turned around and he said, "94."
That's funny.
I said, "Yes, you're right. I'm getting out of this cab."
I'll take those 2 years,
Right.
That's
Right.
very funny. So if you look back at everything, because you have had so many challenges, but also so many wins, what would you say is thing or the couple of things that you have drawn upon to rise from the ashes when there were ashes and to shift gears and pivot when there was pivoting? I mean, designing uniforms, where did that come from? And now you've designed more uniforms than any human being on the planet, So
Right.
what do you think you drew upon? What was the well you went to?
Well, the one thing I do really have, I'm very talented. I'm good at what I do. I said, I just had a wonderful 8 minutes on CBS Morning with Jane Pauley and her show with being interviewed, and I said to them, I said, I'm a short guy. I don't, as a short person, in a race, my legs have to go faster than most people. I can't compete with the big people, but on a short race, I'm unbeatable. And so I have to be assisted later on in the long race. And I think again, what happened, I went into ready to wear. I became the hottest designer on 7th Avenue for about a 10-year period, or one of the hottest designers. And in the middle of that, somebody came to me and said to me, would you do a uniform? And when that fell off, suddenly there was this whole world in uniforms that was at my beck and call because nobody was taking it seriously. And I thought it was a fun thing and it was good money. And then when that began to plateau, I went into loungewear, which was not back into ready to wear. So I never went back. I kept going forward. And
Yeah.
then I had all these things to balance. I became what they call a freelance designer. A freelance designer is somebody who runs his own business. You know what being freelance is. Everything I pay the bills. I do, although I don't do the grunt work anymore. I'm too old to have people who do that for me. But I bit off the edges. The center of the pie got too hot, so I bit off the edges, but the edges were always well done and crisp.
Mm.
And that's kept me relevant. And of course, all the things I've done for the industry, I still to this day, Joss, I don't know if you know it, but I'm on 3 boards in New York, 3 major boards, both the Bryant Park board, but the 7th Avenue board. I was on community board 5 for 25 years. I was the head of new construction of buildings in Midtown Manhattan for 10 years. I'm a joiner. I've always felt I'm a political person. If people ask me, what would you like to do if you were younger? I say mayor of New York. I would have loved to be mayor of New York. I don't know if I'd be a good one, but I would have loved that. Either that or an opera singer. And mayor of New York may be more exciting. But I don't know, where was I going with this? There was always something that was there to level the playing field for me. There was always something. I never fell into a deep, Gene always said to me when we had our problems, and I would say to him, maybe I should go to maybe I should work it out with, no, if you talk to me, if you continue to talk to me, if you continue to talk to me, then we'll be okay. And he made me do it. In fact, there's a letter from him to me in my book at his 50th birthday. And at the end of the letter, he keeps saying, speak to me, speak to me. And I think that's the secret to a great relationship. If you don't speak to each other, and I had a tendency to pull myself back. I had a tendency not to lie, but to sort of color things in a way that weren't fair to him. And he always knew that. He always knew that. So the beauty of getting to be old is that you have all these thoughts in your head. You can think about them. You can dream about them. And going back again to music, to this day, I said this ad nauseum. I fall in love with Gustav Mahler, who is a German composer, Austrian composer from the turn of the century, 1910s, late 1890s, 1910s. And I keep walking with him in the Alps, playing his music. He writes long, lugubrious, sometimes over the top music, but I find myself I'm very much at home in it. And at this point, I've also my will is done, and there's certain music I want played if there's going to be a memorial service for me, and it's a lot of Mahler. There's a song at the end of one of his cycles called "Ich hab die Welt abhanden gekommen, which is sort of the ending of life, but it's also life-giving at the same time. I've reached that stage, I'm close to the end, and I'm not frightened of it. I don't like the idea of it, but I'm not frightened of it.
Well, you're
And-
also, you say you're winding down every once in a while, yet you still have contracts for
Oh, I know,
work and you're designing and you're,
but that makes it more complicated. That makes it more complicated because when I get up in the morning and I take my shower and I comb my hair and I brush my teeth and I put my sandals on, I walk downstairs and I'm tired. I mean, that's crappy. That's lousy.
yeah, well, it's not for the weak of heart getting old.
Oh,
It is not, but you are
oh,
doing it very gracefully
right.
and powerfully, which is, I think, an interesting combination to be graceful and powerful without being forceful. And I think that kind of captures you from my view, at least. And I
How
know
about that?
you'll
How
take it. Okay, good. And I know when Grandpa was 105, at his birthday party, I said to him, what are your words of wisdom to people? Like, what do you want to give to the younger people? Like, what do you want to save them the trouble of having to learn themselves? Save them a few decades. Well, I want to ask you the same question. My best friends are all over 75, and it's pretty much you, mom, dad, my friend Charlene, my friend Eddie. I mean, they're all over 75. And I find the wisdom and the variety of views and just the depth so powerful. So I want to get that from you for people. What is your words of wisdom?
It's a hard and yet profound and yet easy question. My words of wisdom is trust in your judgment. Don't come to the end. Don't come to the end of everything. I have a little quirk in my life. I never realized what I was doing, but when I write, I never put a period at the end. I do dot, 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 which means there's a continuum. There's something in front of my life. And I think if you don't see those dot, dot, dots in front of you, you haven't got much of a life. And that would be my wisdom take on my life.
I love it. I love it. And then is there anything that you can give people in terms of your secret to being, I think, a real demonstration of being unmessable with? And I know you and I have joked about it, but what do you see as an
I am
ingredient?
unmessable with. People don't mess with me. They really don't. I have obviously built a fortress around me that is there, so they don't mess with me. They just don't. And when they do, I've had one or two enemies in my life, and what I did was I don't like confrontation. I find it uncomfortable because I don't like what I see in myself when that confrontation is at its raw heat moment. So I step back. That's why I was a good president of the CFDA. That's why I was a good president of the Sammys. That's why I was a good because I was able to look at everybody and let them have their way, but always did my thing. Always did my thing. Sometimes your father says I'm very vain about that kind of thing. He couldn't understand in my book the chapter about my makeup, not my makeup, but what I do in the morning, what
Moisturizer.
or I said, he doesn't understand that. Good Lord, you have so little left in life. Why don't you take care of your body? You have to take care of your body.
You only have one.
Absolutely. And I hate mine now.
So those of you listening that are younger than 75, enjoy your body while you have it the way
Absolutely.
it is.
Jossie, I tell you, the words of wisdom. That's Jeffrey Banks calling me. It's Jeffrey Banks. Let me call him to get him off, okay?
Sure, no problem.
Jeff, I'm on a long distance here. I'll call you a little later, okay? Thank you.
But yes, if I could talk to my 20-year-old self, I would say three things. Don't wear heels, stretch, and moisturize. Those are the three things.
I'll buy all those. Because I never look good in heels, so I would not. I could have used them in my life. That's very funny. No, but I think, listen, I keep getting your father to, I keep buying him moisturizer. I keep buying him hair stuff. And sometimes he uses it, sometimes he doesn't. I
Yeah.
told him he went from Madison Avenue to Hampton Bays in one fell swoop.
Truer words. Yes, exactly. Well, I so appreciate you, saying yes to doing this, and I'm treasuring every minute of it. And we're gonna put in the show notes a link to buy your book.
Okay,
And
good.
yes,
And
for sure.
it's selling. It's in its second printing, and it's really good. And it's a good book, everybody. It's not just a picture book. It's a good book. I'm beginning to write my next book. So
This is exactly what I'm talking about. ... There you go.
all right, there we go. ...
The next book. Exactly. Well, for everybody listening, watching, however you get your podcast, thanks for tuning in. And if you learned something, if something touched you, if you got value out of this episode, please share it with the people in your life and rate and review it below. And we will see you on the next episode of Be Unmessable With. Thank you again for tuning in to this week's episode of Be Unmessable With the podcast. And I never take for granted that you spend time with me. And I always want to make sure that you get value when you do. So I am including in the show notes a link for you for our Basics of Being Unmessable With workbook. It's a 12-page workbook that gives you all the basics of developing yourself to be unmessable with no matter what life throws at you, to be able to shift from the world of reaction to creation on a dime. And it'll give you a whole practice that you can implement in your daily life over and over and over again. So click on the link below and grab that 12-page workbook and let me know what you discover as you engage with it. Have a great week.